You are welcome to yet another episode of HN What's Your Say? The #1 listening show, where we discuss real issues with real people like you. We are still featuring R. Kelly. Real name Robert Sylvester Kelly. Also known as the R&B King. In the pursuit of justice, the cornerstone of any fair legal system is impartiality.
Neutrality is not the ultimate goal, it's the qualifier for the job.
The fundamental right to a fair trial judged solely by the facts and the law and not by public opinion, media headlines or preconceived beliefs. But when a judge who is supposed to be the ultimate arbiter in the courtroom begins to show signs of partiality before the trial even begins, the integrity of the entire process comes under question. This episode will focus entirely on the conduct of Judge Ann Donnelly, the presiding judge in the New York trial of Robert Sylvester Kelly, the R&B artist known to the world as R. Kelly. We'll explore the serious and credible allegations of bias against her, and how her conduct may have undermined the very principle of judicial neutrality, a principle that is supposed to protect the rights of all defendants regardless of the accusations against them. Let's begin with the issue of pretrial commentary by the Brooklyn federal judge. Were her pretrial statements a breach of judicial neutrality? One of the most troubling aspects of Judge Donnelly's conduct is rooted in her own words. Statements she made publicly before the trial even began. Critics argue that Judge Donnelly, through her early comments during the pretrial conference, effectively compromised the presumption of innocence that R. Kelly was constitutionally entitled to. In her pretrial remarks, Judge Donnelly referred to the severity of the charges against Kelly and emphasized the importance of addressing systemic abuse against women. While on the surface such statements may appear aligned with broader societal concerns, in the context of an upcoming criminal trial where the accused's guilt or innocence had not yet been determined, these comments were anything but neutral. It is critical to understand the symbolic and psychological weight carried by a judge's public statements. Judges are not politicians, they are not activists, and they are not social commentators. They are in fact required by law and by oath to avoid any behavior or commentary that might suggest bias or give the appearance of partiality. By aligning herself even rhetorically with the narratives of systemic abuse before evidence was presented to prove any such abuse occurred and before a jury was sworn in, Judge Donnelly stepped outside her role as an impartial arbiter. She in fact did what no judge should ever do. She echoed the sentiments of the prosecution and in effect signaled to the public, and more critically to the jury, how she viewed the case before it even began. Imagine sitting in a jury box tasked with the grave responsibility of determining someone's guilt or innocence, knowing fully well that the judge presiding over the trial has already made her personal opinions about the defendant. Would you feel free to question the evidence? And would you feel free to express any doubts? Or would you feel intimidated and hesitant to challenge what seemed to already be a foregone conclusion in the judge's mind? For jurors, the judge's demeanor and words are immensely influential. And in this case, the judge's early remarks didn't just set the tone. They arguably laid down a roadmap to conviction. Her comments created an atmosphere in which acquittal would feel not just unpopular but also unacceptable. In many ways, Judge Donnelly's early commentary effectively removed the safe space a juror needs to deliberate honestly and without pressure. Jurors are human and are therefore swayed by authority figures, and in the courtroom there is no higher authority than the judge. When that judge signals her personal investment in the moral themes surrounding the trial, it creates an invisible but powerful pressure on the jury to align themselves accordingly. The result, a trial where jurors may have felt it was a lost card, a risky and even shameful move to entertain the possibility that R. Kelly could be innocent, and that the systemic abuse of black women that the judge was addressing was simply a hoax in this regard. The judge's own perceived belief in his guilt became a shadow cast over the jury box, silently guiding deliberations and ensuring the outcome aligned with what appeared to already be her personal conviction. Now this is not justice. And this is not due process. This is the opposite of what the Constitution promises every defendant in a criminal courtroom. Let's move now to another critical aspect of Judge Donnelly's conduct, which is her decisions regarding evidence presented. Throughout the trial, Judge Donnelly made a series of rulings on what evidence would be admitted. And these rulings, taken together, reveal a troubling pattern, a pattern that many argue reflected not careful impartiality but a systematic preference for the prosecution's narrative. Chief among the concerns was the inclusion of testimonies from numerous alleged victims whose claims were not directly tied to the specific charges being tried in the New York courtroom. In other words, individuals were allowed to testify not about crimes central to the indictment, but about alleged incidents that had no direct bearing on the charges at hand. Now let's be clear. The inclusion of such testimony is extraordinarily powerful in a jury trial. When a parade of accusers whose stories are not part of the formal charges is allowed to take the stand, it creates an impression of overwhelming guilt. The jury begins to see not a case based on facts and legal standards but a character assassination based on volume and not validity. This tactic is what some call trial by narrative, and it has been rightly criticized as deeply prejudicial. And yet Judge Donnelly allowed it to proceed. Time and time again the defense objected to the admission of these unrelated testimonies. Time and time again Judge Donnelly overruled them. In doing so, she allowed the prosecution to paint R. Kelly not as someone on trial for specific alleged crimes, but as a man whose entire character and history should be considered evidence against him regardless of whether those claims had ever been tested, proven or even charged. This is a gross distortion of due process. Under normal circumstances, a judge is supposed to protect the integrity of the trial by limiting evidence to what is relevant, probative and not unduly prejudicial. The Federal Rules of Evidence, specifically Rule 403, exist to prevent exactly what happened here. The admission of testimony that creates emotional bias rather than factual clarity. But in this trial Judge Donnelly appeared to abandon that safeguard. And in doing so she allowed the courtroom to become a stage not for the administration of justice but for the performance of public outrage. The courtroom became a place not of reason but of retribution. And Judge Donnelly, instead of keeping that line sharp and intact, appeared to blur it at every critical opportunity. When we step back and look at the totality of Judge Donnelly's conduct, the pretrial remarks, the subtle pressures placed on the jury and the skewed evidentiary rulings, a pattern emerges. A pattern of bias, a pattern of prejudice, a pattern of decisions and statements that favored the prosecution undermining the defense, and that compromised the foundational fairness of the trial. Now, this isn't just about R. Kelly. This is about the integrity of the American legal system. Because if we allow judges to signal guilt before trial, if we allow them to flood the courtroom with unrelated emotionally charged testimony, and if we accept judicial bias as business as usual, then we are abandoning the principles of fairness, neutrality and due process. No one is above the law, and that includes judges. If R. Kelly was to be tried fairly, he deserved a judge who kept her opinions private, who ruled based on law and not outrage, and one who protected the courtroom from turning into a spectacle. He deserved a judge who held the scales of justice evenly and not one who tilted them before the trial even began. Meanwhile, let's not forget the role of a judge is not to ensure conviction but rather to ensure fairness. And in the case of Judge Ann Donnelly, the evidence suggests she may have failed in that duty. If we are to stand for justice, we must stand for it in all cases. Even the unpopular ones. Even the difficult ones. And even the ones where society has already made up its mind, because that's what justice demands. Please drop your thoughts in the comments section below. We want to hear from you. If you want to be featured in our video releases, send us your clips by emailing them to hnnewsroom242@gmail.com or use Google Drive for larger files. Be sure to include your name and any details you'd like us to know. We can't wait to showcase your contributions. That is all we had for you today on HN What's Your Say. To keep updated whenever we post a new video, subscribe to this channel now. Also remember to hit the bell icon and enable notifications. And feel free to share your opinions with us in the comment section below, and let us know if you would like us to publish your views in our next release. We value all our subscribers' opinions.